ahead. You've made it 55 minutes.
Okay, so we do have no
55
more on
minutes
and no
in.
more off. This trolley is in motion.
And you're still here. How about that?
Please
Learning
remain seated at all
something? I've never
times,
been
keeping
here.
all items and body parts inside.
Learning everything.
And please remain seated until I get to the next stop and the bell
At least a
rings.
brief overview so I know what to do next time.
Now, right ahead of us here is the famous St. Augustine Police Department. Now, the police department is located centrally between the distillery and the winery. It's also right across the street from about 600 college students. Do we think that's a coincidence? Also on this property was Flagler Memorial Hospital. Now, if you were employed by Henry Flagler, you could get free health care. And your family could get health care for 50 cents a month, or about $6 a year. Who's in favor of Flagler care? Sign me up twice.
That's what you need to do. That's fine. I'm stolen in car. You've been saying that for 20 years.
What's that?
What she said since that's when it came out. 20 years. A stolen car. Right in the magazine.
You're gonna miss me when I don't give you all of my information.
Stuck in the traffic, stuck in the traffic, stuck in the traffic.
You mean at the hotel?
Yeah.
It's the
So right here on your left, these three buildings here,
trolley station.
those are the dorm rooms, but they were the offices for Flagler's Railroad. Now, when Henry Flagler was building his hotel, the only problem he had was transportation. See, the railroad stopped up north in Jacksonville at that time. So if you were coming to St. Augustine, you had to cover about 35 miles of rough terrain. So Henry Flagler, you would have to get on a steamship or a horse and buggy at that time, and both were slow and dangerous. So Henry Flagler, he bought the rights and the property, and he extended the railroad down to St. Augustine. And then years later, he extended the railroad all the way to Key West. But that was years later. Now that was quite a project in itself. They had to go across about 7 miles of the Atlantic Ocean to complete that project. Now they said at the age of 81 that he got on the railroad and took the very first ride to Key West. Now coming up in front of us to your left, this white picket fence here, that plantation house. Now that is the Markland Plantation. That was the home of the second of those blood red orange plantations that St. Augustine is famous for. But they also died during the freeze. That was also the home of the Dr. Andrew Anderson Jr. Now he was the personal physician of Henry Flagler's. Now they said you could often see them sitting on the front porch enjoying a drink together. I'm sure it was probably sweet tea at that time. This is also one of the few plantation houses that have never been remodeled. It is still in its original state. Now right here to your left, these uprights here in front of us has chains with the balls and spikes there. Now that was some of the first defense that was used to defend the bay by the Spanish. They would bury those about 3 feet below sea level. And when the enemy ships come in to attack, they would get the bottom ripped out from under their wooden ships. Talk about a surprise attack. Now those are original. Henry Flagler had those dug up out of the bay and restored, and he thought they would make a good decoration for the hotel. Now if you notice here the Ponce de Leon to Flagler College, you can see the lines on the building there. It was also made with the poured concrete method, the same as the Villa Zareta that Franklin Smith built. Now like I said, they closed down in 1967, and by 1972 they were a 4-year accredited co-ed college. Now it is a private college, and it says they have one of the highest tuitions in the state. Now if you stay there on campus, if you stay on campus for a year, which is 2 semesters, it's about $50,000 for the tuition. Now coming up in front of us is the Casa Monica Hotel. Now that is the 3rd hotel of Henry Flagler's. That's the only one he didn't build, and it's the only one that's still operating as a hotel today. So Mr. Franklin Smith, he built the Casa Monica at that time, but he couldn't make it profitable. So he had financial issues and he had to sell the hotel at auction. Well, Henry Flagler bought the hotel, and so at that time he had all 3 hotels on the same street corner. He had the Ponce de Leon, the Alcazar, and the Casa Monica. But when he bought the hotel, he renamed it the Cordova. And when he had the Cordova and the Alcazar open, they had a covered walkway that went across the top of the street between the 2 buildings. Now right here to your left is the governor's house. So here to your left is the governor's house, and just ahead of us is the plaza. And over to the left is stop 14, that is the cathedral, the old church. Now these were the 3 major parts of any Spanish settlement. They would put the plaza in place and build the streets around it. So this area here was the first of the Spanish settlement of St. Augustine. Now you can walk across to the governor's house from stop 14, and they have a small museum, and they tell you about the importance of chocolate in St. Augustine. Now they had chocolate in St. Augustine as early as the 1640s, and it was a sign of stature and power. Now right here on your left, this pedestal here to your left, on top of that pedestal is a statue of Ponce de Leon. Now that is a life-size statue, all 4'11" of him. Now they said that he would wear a plume feather hat and high boots, so he could stand more like 5'9". I guess he had a little man complex. You know, kind of like Napoleon. So we're coming up to stop 14. This is the beach bus stop. Now if you brought the beach bus over from your hotel on the island, this is where you'll need to get back to. Also, this is the other end of St. George Street. Now you can walk down to the right down St. George Street and you can enjoy all of the shops and restaurants there. Please wait until I stop and the bell rings, If you are exiting, do so to your right, backing down as you would a ladder. But please wait until I stop and the bell rings. Y'all enjoy your day.
It's a cue ball break. Cue ball break. Where you can enjoy the pretty face of cue ball. Just a little inexpensive Ducati bike.
So we do have no more on and no more off. This trolley is in motion. Please remain seated at all times, keeping all items and body parts inside, as I cannot stop to retrieve them. No smoking, vaping, or consumption of alcohol, and please hold conversations to a minimum so everyone can enjoy the tour. Now, my name is George, and you are on the Good Golly Trolley. Golly. So like I said, when Henry Flagler bought the Casa Monica, he renamed it the Cordova. But then years later, there was a company that bought this property, and they reopened the hotel, and they renamed it the Casa Monica, because that's what it was originally named. Now a little bit more about the governor's house there. So before Florida became a state of the Union, you had East Florida and West Florida. And St. Augustine was the capital of East Florida. And Tallahassee was the capital of West Florida. Now when they become a state, they join together. Now right here on your right is the entryway into the Casa Monica. That is the original entryway. So like I say, when Florida became a state in 1845, they joined the state. And Tallahassee was closer to the center of the state. So they kept that as the capital. Now coming up in front of us is the Trinity Parish Church. Now that congregation was established in 1821. Now that was the first Protestant congregation in the state of Florida. Now they would have services in the governor's house at that time, but in 1825 they laid the cornerstone for this building. And by 1831 they started having services in this building. They've been having services here since 1831. Now this is another one of those 9 Episcopal churches that you can see throughout the city. Now coming up here in front of us to our right is the glass building. Now that is the Woolworths. On the door you can see the Woolworths. That's where they staged that protest during the Civil Rights Movement. Now right here on your right, between these columns, is the oldest street in the country. Now at first it was Spanish Hospital Street. You know, because that's where the hospital is. But Avila, Spain is the sister city of St. Augustine. It's the birthplace of Pedro Menendez. So it's the sister city of St. Augustine. So they renamed that oldest street Avila Street.
Red light.
So we're coming up to stop number
Red
15
light
is the
showing.
Bayfront stop. Now you can access the marina here, and you can take a number of tours on the bay. You can look ahead of us and see our original pirate ship there. You can take a tour on it. You can also take a number of party boats, and you can go parasailing if you would like. Also, this is the O.C. White's restaurant stop.
Oh,
That's a good seafood recommendation if you need one. Also, right here to your left, down on the corner there, is the Harry's Cajun Seafood. That's another good seafood recommendation. Now we are coming to stop number 15. Please wait until I stop and the bell rings. Exit to your right, backing down as you would a ladder. But please wait until I stop and the bell rings. Good. When we get to stop 1, they'll validate those and you can get stickers. Okay, so we do have no more on and no more off. This trolley is in motion. Please remain seated at all times, keeping all items and body parts inside, as I cannot stop to retrieve them. Now, like I said, right here to your left is our original pirate ship. It is called the Black Raven. You can take a tour on it, and you can take a number of party boats. And over to your left is our Matanza Bay. And then across the bay is Anastasia Island. And over on the island is our old lighthouse. Now that is the second lighthouse in the history of St. Augustine. Come right on out. Now that lighthouse was completed in 1874. They were worried about the first lighthouse collapsing. Well, in 1880, the first lighthouse did collapse due to beach erosion. Now, they said when that second lighthouse was in use, it could be seen up to 19 miles out to sea. Now, they opened that to the public in 1994 as a maritime museum. Now, you can enjoy the museum. You can also climb to the top of the lighthouse and enjoy the view. Now, it is 219 steps to the top of the lighthouse. The only thing I would enjoy would be catching my breath. Now coming up here in front of us is the St. Francis Barracks. Now this was the home of the British soldiers. So the British occupied St. Augustine during the Revolutionary War. But this is also the home of the Florida National Guard now. Stop number 16 is the oldest house. Please wait until I stop and the bell rings. If you are exiting, do so to your right, backing down as you would a ladder. But please wait until I stop and the bell rings. Now in 1702, the British attacked St. Augustine. They completely destroyed the city, burned it to the ground. Now after that attack, they started making all of the structures out of masonry and brick products. So this white masonry one story here, that was the first house built after that attack. So it is the oldest house in St. Augustine. No more on and no more off. This trolley is in motion. Now the original Spanish house was a one-story house, but the second story added there and the second story added on most of these structures were added by the British when they were here. Now if you look to your right, just ahead of us, that light pink building, that light pink one-story house, now that is one of the few original Spanish houses that still exist. It's a one-story house and they have an entryway into a courtyard. They would never enter from the street into the house for safety reasons. Now right here in front of us, this white house here, that is called the Chechi house. In 1908, you could buy a version of this house from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Now they would bring it over in crates and you could have a house raising with your family. That would be kind of like buying a house from IKEA today. Now coming up in front of us, in front of the barracks, those cannons, now those are original cannons. Now those cannons and all of the cannons that you see throughout the city are original. They have been dredged up out of the bay in different periods of time and restored. Now over on the island, like I say, you could enjoy the lighthouse. They also have a lot of public beach access and a number of good restaurants. Also over on the island, they have the alligator farm. Now you can tour the alligator farm, and if you're feeling lucky, you can take a zip line across the top of the alligator farm. Now who wants to sign up? Now right here in front of us is our bridge of lines. Now those four towers there, it is an operating drawbridge. It goes up every half hour as it's needed.
Traffic stop. Cue ball traffic stop.
Now they completed construction on the bridge in 1927 during the Florida boom period. And at that time it was the Matanzas Bay Bridge. But then it was renamed as the Bridge of Lions. Well, it was the Ponce de Leon, and Leon meaning lion in Spanish. So it is now the Bridge of Lions. So I got a question for you. So has anybody got the bet going? Anybody trying to figure out where I'm from? I usually have somebody trying to figure that out. Any guesses?
Louisiana.
No. Now does anybody think maybe Boston?
No.
Or Jersey?
No.
Well, it's South Georgia.
Fidelia.
If you know Waycross, Georgia, or the Okefenokee Swamp, I've been there most of my life. Is everybody enjoying their day so far?
Yeah.
All right. As long as we're having fun and learning something, I'm doing my job. And I have been doing this for about 4 months now. So coming up in front of us is our marina on your right. That is the oldest continuously operated marina in the country. Like I said, you can access the marina and take a number of tours on the bay. And just ahead of us up there on the right, that small building, that is the oldest mini golf in the state of Florida. It's the first one that was open in the state. Now they say it's the second one in the country, as there was one open in Georgia first. I believe it was Savannah, but I'm not sure about that.
We're stuck in traffic, stuck in traffic, stuck in traffic. Time for cue ball sing-along. What you be saying?
So has anybody done or thinking about doing the Ghost and Gravestones tour that we have every night? That is a very eye-opening experience, they say. I'm going tonight, will be my first time. So I hope they say it's a very great experience. Like I say, we've been occupied since 1565. There is a lot of history here. That Talamato Cemetery, that Catholic cemetery, it is very haunted. Also, we have the old jail. Now that was a hanging jail. They had 8 documented hangings there. I say documented because that's the ones they did the paperwork on. They also have the old jail after dark. And they go in the old jail after midnight and they take the paranormal equipment in there so you can video and hear the different sounds. Now right here on your left is the Surprise building. They said that was the country's first Walmart. You didn't know what was coming in as far as supplies and staples on the ships and buggies. So when you went in there, you were surprised as to what you could buy. Now just ahead of us here on the left, that flagpole there, that's a World War I memorial flagpole. Now it was gifted to the city by Dr. Andrew Anderson Jr. That was Henry Flagler's personal physician. And over here on your left, this skyscraper, that's the only skyscraper that you will see in the city. If you're in the back and can't see it, you'll see it in just a second. Now they built that in 1928 as the Treasury building. But after they built it, St. Augustine didn't like it. They wanted to keep their colonial aspect, keep their skyline clean. So they passed a law that said nothing could be built higher than 2.5 stories, or approximately 35 feet tall. So that is the only skyscraper that you will see. Now when they told me that, I thought that they were full of it, because you know over on the beach they have a lot of hotels. But St. Augustine Beach and St. Augustine are 2 separate cities. I didn't know that at the time. But they have different governments. They are 2 completely different cities.